Faerun, the setting for most of the 5th edition adventures for the Baldur's Gate games and more, is a very well explored continent. We have had many books on this place, from adventures to lore dumps to novels to, again, even video games released for this place. So basically, we know a lot about this location. Now, the cool thing about dragons in particular is that they live for a very, very long time. So a dragon that shows up in the lore 1,000 or even 2,000 years from the present day is very much still alive today. A dragon that shows up in a 2nd edition adventure most likely is still alive in 5th edition. Because of this, we actually know a lot about dragons in this area. Specifically, we know who are the most powerful dragons, the dragons that you need to be wary of. We are of course talking about the ancient ones. We know their names, we know their powers, we know their history, but most importantly, we know their lairs. We know where they are. This is me taking a little break from the outer planes and instead focusing on something a little bit closer to home. This is a project that I've been meaning to do for a while because dragons are awesome. But it is particularly more awesome because a lot of these dragons do make an appearance in 5th edition, which makes learning about them all the more compelling. I do want to say though, nothing that I'm going to cover with these videos about dragons has any 5th edition spoilers. These dragons do show up in some adventures, like I said, whether as allies, enemies, or even simple passerbys, but nothing that I will cover in here will use information gotten through those 5th edition adventures. After all, I will be telling you what they don't tell you about those dragons, so the whole point is to avoid what they do tell you in 5th edition. But yeah, dragons in general are very well-known creatures. People know them, people fear them. It makes sense why an adventurer would know about these mighty creatures, because they are, in the literal sense, legendary. Bards talk about them. Books are written about them. They are like kings of nature. A kingdom's borders are designed around them, and you should know about them. For a dragon to reach ancient status, it must survive for thousands of years, and a dragon doesn't just do that by being average. These dragons have shaped the course of history in the Forgotten Realms. None of them are normal. They can't be to have reached this level, and because they are so important, we know most of them. Just ancient blue dragons, for example, I could tell you a few. Garimviok, which lives in the Desert of Desolation in Roran. We got Voraxig-Gegirak, which lives in the Kalam Desert. Gondalath, who lives in Hero's Helm in Anorok. Justanius from the Dragonsword Mountains. Eric Lathagra in the Small Teeth of Em. Maldradior from the Smoking Mountains of Unther. Maligris, also from Anorok, who is, by the way, now a Dracolich, and we have Olothuntor, who lives in Mount Aradin, really close to Waterdeep. These are names of legend. Mighty blue dragons who live in the region, but of course, today we will focus on one in particular, Iymrith. But before we do that, I wanted to bring to your attention a really cool PDF that I've had on my store for a few weeks now, but I haven't really had the chance to tell you guys much about it. What they don't tell you about magic items. The PDF is essentially a collection of enchantments and their prices, basically to simulate the idea of having active magical shops in your Dungeons & Dragons games. If you had gold and you went into a city to purchase some magical items, you would basically open this PDF and then see what's available. Or you could use these prices that I have here in order to enchant or create your very own magic items. And you could add +1s to your weapons and armor, your paladin could enchant his sword so that it deals extra 1d4 holy damage, you could get a shield that lets you spend your reaction to resist incoming attacks. There's all kinds of stuff, and they are highly customizable so that you could create, say, boots enchanted with the jump spell, or craft your very own magical wands. You could purchase an orb and enchant it so that it can summon undead of any challenge rating that you desire. I have revamped the price structure for many magical items to make them make more sense, because let's face it, some of the prices for healing potions and scrolls were all over the place in 5th edition, and most of them were so expensive that nobody would buy them. I have rebalanced those prices to actually make more sense. I've also added a price for many of the magic items from the Dungeon Master's Guide, so stuff like bags of holding, sending stones, a bunch of them. I didn't add all of the magic items because, well, there are many magic items that are supposed to be given to the players by the DM and shouldn't really be purchased, but I added over 56 magic magic items from the Dungeon Master's Guide into the PDF with their descriptions and their prices. As a DM, you don't really want your players to be looking into the DMG because it is not a book meant for them, but it was always awkward as a player who wanted to buy magical items to not be able to see what was available to purchase. So I have added all the basic stuff in there so that every player should get access to it, while leaving the more esoteric and unique magic items away so that DMs can choose to use those or not. But yeah, if you're looking to purchase or craft magic items, everything that you need is in here. All of the important enchantments for weapons, armors, and shields. We have a bunch of potions and oils, we got scrolls. If you're wondering how much it would cost to enchant a staff that summons flumps, I literally have a price for that. Everything that you need and more. We already had prices for poisons in the DMG, but I added them here for good measure so that you as a player would have access to absolutely everything. But yeah, check out the store, mrrex.shop, or click the link in the description, or simply click any of the cool product pictures under my video. We got tons of amazing things in there, and every purchase that you make supports the channel. So thank you very much. Now, on to the video. Iymrith is an ancient blue dragon with 3 different titles. She has been called the Dragon of Statues, the Blue Dragon of the Chill Sands, and the more commonly known title, the Doom of the Desert. Now, the earliest records that we have of her are from 1,000 years ago from the present day, when she started becoming active around the Anorok region. And she was seen attacking camps of this particular group of people called the Bedin, or Bedines, which are a race of humans from the Anorok deserts. Our records show that she attempted to fight an older dragon from the northern region of the High Moor, but then lost and collapsed somewhere within the Forgotten Forest. Now, this would have been the end for this dragon. She would have just died here and lived a unremarkable life like many dragons do, but something special happened within that forest. She somehow survived, clinging to life by hunting in the darkness of the forest, avoiding being seen by anyone because she was heavily wounded and would have been prey for almost any creature at that point. And she found an ancient set of ruins, which we now believe would have belonged to the ancient Netheril Empire. Now, this is where I need to give you guys a little bit of context. So, the Netheril Empire was the greatest human empire of Faerun, which existed about 5,000 years ago from the present day and collapsed around 1,500 years ago. Now, this empire used to exist around here, basically where the desert of Anorok is located, except that back then, this wasn't the desert. This was just normal green lands and mountains. The Netherese were incredibly powerful wizards, like so strong that they casually could cast 10th, 11th, and even 12th level spells. They had floating cities that would levitate via magic, and basically were just the dominant force of the time. Unfortunately for them though, they entered battle with the Faerun, this group of aberrations from the Underdark that effectively countered the Netherese. See, these guys were extremely resistant to magic and were powerful casters themselves. The big problem for the Netherese was that the magic of the Faerun used moisture from their surroundings as catalysts for their magic. So the more magic that these aberrations would cast, the more of the land would be destroyed. And then you had the spells of the Netherese that they would use against the Faerun also exacerbated these issues, resulting in basically a terrible ecological disaster coming from both sides. So the normal fertile lands eventually turned into what is essentially now a magical desert. This is when Karsus, of course famous now, this really powerful archmage, attempted to cast the only ever attempted 13th level spell in order to take on the essence of Mystra, the goddess of magic, which resulted in magic ceasing to function for a few minutes, which resulted then in all of the floating cities to collapse because of course they levitated using magic, and this resulted in the destruction of the entire empire in almost under 10 minutes. This event is known now today as Karsus' Folly. It was because of this that the reincarnated goddess of magic, after she died there, basically banned all spells of 10th level or higher from ever being casted again, which is why nowadays we only have up to 9th level. So as you can see, very important lore. Anyways, Iymrith, the blue dragon, found a ruin of this ancient empire, the Netherese Empire, within this forest, which started something of an obsession for her. See,
There's a lot of hidden power in magic items and scrolls that you would find in Netherese ruins, but what she found would instead change her life forever. She instead found a powerful archmage, some kind of lich or skeletal wizard of sorts. The records are unclear as to who specifically this entity was, but it was clear that this individual magically influenced Iymrith. The creature used powerful magic to change the body of the blue dragon to make her far more intelligent than normal, and to attune her body to magics in such a way to make her just generally more adept at magic. It is understood that it did this in order to then use Iymrith as a servant, or as a weapon, or even as a steed for itself. We actually know that these two raided many camps and settlements together, and people at the time made note of seeing the blue dragon having a skeletal wizard riding her. Now, what happened to this archmage is unknown. All we really have are notes that tell us that they basically raided places together at one point, and then other notes that state that Iymrith eventually moved back into the desert of Anorok alone. Of course, it is possible that she defeated this archmage and earned her own freedom, or perhaps he died in some other way in one of those mini raids. Whatever the truth is, we just don't know, though it is at least safe to assume that this skeletal lich might have been an ancient Netherese wizard from the time of the Empire, unearthed by Iymrith during her searches for magic. But basically by now, Iymrith already had power far beyond what a dragon of her age would have, and her capabilities with magic were equal if not superior than even that of an ancient blue dragon. But better than that, Iymrith understood the value, the potential, and the might of what lay bare underneath the sands of Anorok, the remains of the Netherese Empire. The tropes of ancient magic from the floating cities of Netheril could now be found, unearthed, and exploited by her. So she started this process of unearthing them. Now, the first buried tower that she found held a small library filled with magical tomes and scrolls, which she studied. And then through this, she learned of the creation of automatons, something like a golem but in the shape of gargoyles. This particular magic was of great use to her, since creating an army of gargoyles would simultaneously grant her protection from adventurers who would want to kill her, but it would also grant her servants that she could use to then dig the vast sands of the desert. And so she put the spell to good use, creating armies of these things. Quickly around the region, she became famous for this magic, now being called the Dragon of Statues. The more gargoyles that she would create, the stronger her position would become, and the more magic that she would excavate, which would then grant her even more power and knowledge. Her magic, of course, was far more complex and powerful than just the mere creation of gargoyles. First of all, these were not just like any normal gargoyles, but extremely intelligent ones too. Iymrith could organize them in complex ways so as to create powerful armies. She could instruct them in the use of artillery and martial weapons. She would have them create traps and deceive enemies. She could have them construct ballistas and walls to protect her excavations. This was a serious power that she had. Further, Iymrith had developed this extremely rare magic that allowed her to move her consciousness onto a statue, whether it was a gargoyle or any other statue of her creation. So she would create these gigantic statues made out of stone, and then she could move her essence onto those statues, and then cast her spells as if the statue was herself, while keeping her real body somewhere else safe. Her reasoning for developing this magic really does come from the need of, any spellcaster that reaches her levels of knowledge, which is to find a way to seek immortality. She was effectively concocting her own form of lichdom in a way by attempting to infuse her soul onto objects. In fact, by this time, she had even constructed a mechanical dragon that she could move her essence to. Now, this golden age of Iymrith was momentarily stopped by a fateful dig that she once did in the desert. In one of her many excavations, she ended up unearthing an opening onto a den of Faerun, which of course, as we know, extremely powerful aberrations. She almost died in that encounter, forcing her to form a new obsession throughout the coming centuries, which was to find a way to kill these Faerun, which surprisingly she ended up succeeding in. Throughout her research for the next couple of centuries, she developed a spell called Force Burn, which would become her signature spell and basically the bane of any adventuring group, Faerun, or any other type of dragon that might ever come to contest Iymrith's claim onto this side of the Anorok. So, Force Burn is a fascinating spell. It is a 9th level spell. It is a combination of evocation and necromancy with a range of 900 feet, which is a lot. It basically takes on the form of a ray spell that juts out from you and then blasts an enemy creature. Now, the spell was created with the intention of specifically destroying Faerun, but it most certainly can obliterate any type of creature. So, if you're a Faerun, or if you're flying, levitating, or shapeshifted, it deals tremendous damage. If you're not any of those things, then you take half damage. However, the real interesting bit is what happens after. So, if you're a spellcaster, you have to do 2 saving throws. For every failure, you permanently forget a spell. Like literally, a random spell that you know just gets nuked, deleted from your memory forever. This is an exclusive spell from Iymrith that only she knows, and she created specifically to deal with the Faerun, and it worked like a charm. None of the Faerun wanted to fight her out of fear that she would delete the spells that they knew. Further, the extreme magic resistance that the Faerun had did not block Force Burn at all, which was something that they were not used to. The creation of this spell effectively granted Iymrith protection from the one group of monsters that could challenge her supremacy of the western side of the desert, granting her full rights to excavate and unearth all the ancient magical treasures that she wanted. Now, over time, she ended up unearthing a buried city under the desert right under these parts of the map, which would end up basically becoming her ultimate lair. The name of the city is Iymrith, but as far as everyone in the region is concerned, its name would be forgotten by history, and so many who would come to treat with the dragon would call it the Nameless City, or the City of Statues. It is on this city where she holds the vast majority of her legions of gargoyles, who man the walls, they man the catapults, and her engines of war. The city is extremely well trapped with a lot of magical protections, and the only living creature that is said to live there is the dragon itself. Quote, Iymrith's driving aim is to gain all the magic she can and thereby rise to supremacy over all other dragons, Faerun, or anyone else who might challenge her. Then she can live forever, crafting ever stronger magic. And no one knows whether she'll ever feel secure enough to think of mating, dwelling elsewhere, or sharing her magic with beings not of her own creation. When not altering or combining spells, Iymrith is usually attempting to infuse some part of an artificial draconic body with a magical property or power. The upper reaches of her central city chambers are crowded with floating sculpted stone body parts and more or less complete bodies. On several occasions, spell experimentations that went awry have awakened these floating dragon fragments into wild eruptions of movement and magical power, slaughtering gargoyles and causing even Iymrith to retreat and blast anything that comes too close. Though she has several caverns in the Grey Peak and Sunset Mountains, the Doom of the Desert's lair is the nameless ruined city that lies northeast of Ascor, half buried in sand. There she lies atop her hoard of gems in a huge temple or meeting hall, with her tail filling the entrance to her smaller chamber of magic. All around her are gargoyle guardians, and her lesser gargoyle servants fly patrols to watch for intruders, tunnel the sand-choked chambers and passages beneath her, and tirelessly transport rocks from the nearby mountains to create a permanent windbreak dune or wall on the windward side of the city. At least one adventuring band has reported being fired upon by stone-hurling engines, trebuchets, that were aimed and re-aimed with great accuracy by gargoyles seeking to dissuade any invasion of the city. These weapons could hurl showers of boulders almost a mile from the crumbling outer walls of the ancient city, reinforced by gargoyles swooping on the intruders from aloft, dropping boulders on them, end quote. As you can see, the might of the ancient blue dragon Iymrith goes far beyond merely being an extremely large dragon, which is already formidable enough, but it also accounts for a spellcaster of the maximum possible caliber, wielding spells that are unknown even to some of the most powerful wizards in the world, and this is on top of having access to some of the greatest magical secrets in the continent, thanks to all of the unearthed magical treasures from the most powerful wizardly city that this continent has ever had. And you combine this with a large army of gargoyle golems ready to meet any enemy that comes their way, and you have, of course, one of the most powerful entities in Faerun. And to top all of this off, her city is almost impregnable. With armies of gargoyles protecting the outer walls, most of the city lies completely under the sands. So to impregnate the city, you would have to dig into the sand to reach the inner chambers of the city. And then you would have to contend with statues which could hold the essence of the blue dragon, which she could use to cast spells through. Now, again, Iymrith's goal is to find some form of immortality, a way to be able to withstand death. Her magics currently allow her to transform her essence onto other statues, and more recently, into a powerful draconic construction which would keep her alive in case of some devastating attack. The latest news on Iymrith is that she is currently in the process of being able to create a living body that she would be able to transfer her essence over to. It's something like the spell Clone, for example, but for a dragon, which appears to be much more difficult to produce. But this is currently her main goal. Quote, Iymrith is growing more whimsical and carefree as she ages, more caught up in the exaltation of wielding magic and increasingly less caring of the world around her and of her own safety. He compared her behavior to that of some ancient elves, yearning for a oneness with magic that, legends whisper, led some of them to seek other forms of existence, even in some ironic cases, dragon shape. Elminster believes that Iymrith's attempt to transfer her sentience from a draconic body to body may have already led her close to a transcendent state of existence as a disembodied, mist-like flying spirit, although she is yet a long way from preferring such a state to her familiar and powerful draconic form. The old mage believes an attack that destroyed her body might not slay her, but might instead drive her into a wraith-like continued existence. End quote. This is of course written by Ed Greenwood himself. If Iymrith were to die, it appears that she already possesses enough magical knowledge to continue living, and then possibly extend her essence onto one of her many statue-like phylacteries. Then one has to wonder what it would actually take to kill such a dragon, and if there would ever be an end to the doom of the desert. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember before you leave to leave a like on the video if you can, and of course subscribe if you still haven't. Subscribing guarantees you that the algorithm will show you my videos, so if you like this stuff, subscribe. Also check out my D&D store, mrrex.shop. We have tons of cool PDFs in there to make your D&D experience a lot better. We have an armor redesigned system for those of you who want to try out damage reduction as a stat in 5e, which is crazy fun. We have our magic item PDF with prices for all kinds of magic items so that your players actually have something to do with their gold that they collect. It is by far my own player's favorite PDF out of all of the ones that I have. It's really good. And of course, my monster classes collection where you can level up as a monster. All of these monsters have features from level 1 to level 20, and they basically take on the form of both your race and class. We got more coming. Soon I will have Monster Classes 3, which are the Familiar, the Vampire, and the Treant, so look forward to that. I am still in the process of working on Monster Classes 4, which would be the Beholder, the Mind Flayer, and the UNT, but of course, because those are copyrighted terms, I can't use those names. But anyways, I would like to thank my Patreon supporters, Barry Maskant, 5e Magic Shop, Morgan Johnson, Rusty Rain, Doc Feeder, The Great Codini, Omega Scales, Terry Culp, Falky951, Ordoric, Sabim Kurshap, Thomas Hunt, Soulless Rider, Stalia, Treb909, Trevor Hess, The Living Guild Pack, Shane and Sam Skinner, Steven, Naktor Ashura, The Wizard's Vault, Herbert Johnson, James the Perverted, Shoddycast, Jesse Feliciano, Lucas Cyrek, John Harley, Sir Ignatius Thunderblade, Warren Smith, Wyvern Claw 00, Creasy 3, Murden Games, Loa, Falcon Scientist, Richard Sawyer, Mavrath Master of Secrets, Lauren, Guy Broman, Mediocre at Best, and Similar Sound for supporting me on Patreon at the $25 level. If you would like to support me as well, then please head on over to patreon.com/MrRex to support. Alright guys, see you all on the next one.